Hey, folks, welcome back to More Than a Refresh. Today we have Andrew Aitken of Rural AI with us. Andrew, give us a little introduction and let's talk about this rural AI thing.
Sure. It's actually called the Center for Rural AI. We are
Center
a
for, okay.
501c3 nonprofit, recently established our home base is in Durango, Colorado. And really, the core purpose is to help enable the rural economy with AI capabilities. That's one piece of it. Um, we're starting to work with higher education, with rural small businesses, municipalities. That's kind of our core audience. Um, the second piece of what we want to do is begin to work with the builders, the frontier models, to ensure that they are sourcing, consuming, incorporating rural AI data into their models, which they aren't today. There's nothing nefarious about it. It's simply that the signals or the data that's consumed by models to produce but by the builders to produce their latest and greatest models misses a lot of data or isn't contextualizing data from rural economies and ecosystems. And there are 60 million of us in the US that
Yeah,
are
of
called
which I
rural
am one,
citizens.
right? And it what do you well, before I get into that, let me ask you this. What do you mean AI capabilities? Right now, I get the data portion of it, right? It makes sense that the current stream is going to go after the easy data. And easy data is the mass
Urban.
market, right? Urban mass market data. That it makes sense. I agree with you. It's not nefarious. I think it's short-sighted, but I don't think it's nefarious. But when you did your initial intro, you said making sure AI capabilities for rural. What does that mean?
So So on Friday, I was in La Junta, Colorado, which is a small town of 10,000 in eastern Colorado. They have actually a really beautiful junior college called Otero, and they were hosting rural startup days. The Greater Venture Colorado, another nonprofit, hosts rural startup days throughout Colorado. So they asked me to present, and I did, and it was awesome actually. Um, and hearing the stories about rural communities and ecosystems, this is a town that was 17 or 18,000, I believe, 6 or 7 years ago, lost certain water rights. And so
Mm.
number of farming, number of people who were either farmers or dependent on the farming economy had to leave, had to move away, had to find other jobs. Yet there's a huge amount of energy and enthusiasm and good old American grit, which you find in um, rural America. And so when I say enable, it was literally spend an hour with them talking about how to prompt. What is a prompt? What are the main elements of an AI model that someone who's just AI curious, beginning their journey, needs to understand? Um, and one of the follow-ups that we are doing, when I say enable, like for example, this month, the 24th of this month in Durango, we're hosting an AI fundamentals workshop. When I say enabling it, it's going to be talking to them what AI is, how they should use it. If you want to protect your data, don't use the free versions, simple things like that. But it's going to be hands-on. So at the end of the workshop, the end of the 4 hours, they will have a personal plan that they have built using AI. And that plan may be personal, maybe how do I improve my life, or it may be for their business or their own little nonprofit. But when I say enabling, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so this is interesting to me because it's not. It reminds me of a lot of the work that I used to do back pre 2010. I was living rural, and I was obviously much younger. You and I have a very similar hairstyle now.
We won't
Um,
go there too much.
but I did a lot of workshops helping essentially rural and older people understand the internet just in
Yes.
general, like what
Yes.
data to put in, how to protect your data. Back then it was how to get them off Internet Explorer and onto Firefox, all those types of things.
Yeah.
Um, but what interested me in the whole Center for Rural AI is that technology has come so far now that we don't need even a wire anymore, right? You just need a clear view of the sky to have decent internet. That, as you mentioned, there's 60 million of us. A lot of us are entrepreneurial-ish, right? We're at least adjacent to it.
Yes.
Whether we're farmers, ranchers, I mean, obviously I'm not, but farmers, ranchers, or homesteaders, or part-timers, or, whatever the case may be. It seems that there is a untapped market for these people, right? They
Yes.
now have the ability to have a first class connection. I mean, surprisingly, um, when I moved to Montana last May, one of the things that blew my mind is that they were laying fiber, and I don't live anywhere near a city.
Hmm.
Right? I am rural, but sure enough, it's a co-op, and, they pulled the conduit, and within the next 60 days or so, I will have 1 gig down, 512 up for, like, 98 bucks a month,
Yeah.
right? Now, I don't need that, but I mean, because Starlink is enough, but it seems that that market is there now, that if they can become educated to take advantage of it.
That and that's the key. There is Starlink. There is a lot more fiber. There's investment going into broadband for rural communities and
Mhm,
ecosystems to the tens of billions of dollars. Federal, local, state are investing in making sure that there is equitable access to broadband, for example. Um, and with that does give people the capability to use AI effectively wherever you are. So a lot of this enablement that we're doing really is very, very fundamental. But what I found in some of the workshops and the conversations is it you can't make an assumption. Because when I was in La Junta last week, there were some people that were had signed on to the free version of chat a couple weeks ago, but didn't even understand really how to do it properly, for example.
mhm.
And then there are others that the night before had vibe coded um, a entire website to help people plan their wheelchair accessible vacations. And it was awesome. When I saw that, I was really impressed. Right. And this was just a few local people at the workshop got together, stayed after the workshop, spent 3 hours that night and built a beautiful website. Right. Where businesses can add their own capability, where people can basically, it's a Reddit for people in wheelchairs to plan their vacations.
Mhm.
Uh, so you can't make any assumptions because there are those people who are just can just learn how to spell AI accurately, and then there are others who are already down the path of exploration or using it to build something.
Well, and I think you actually made a really good point. You can't make assumptions because a lot of, not all, of course, but a lot of urban dwellers, of which I have been one, you make the assumption that because people are rural, they're less educated,
Yes.
or, um, well, that's the key, less educated. And the reality is the numbers don't match that. I mean, especially if you're ranchers or farmers, or um, you know, eh, growing hay for ranchers or farmers, or any other kind of or agricultural slash industrial
Hmm.
field. Often, we're talking about people with masters, because there's a whole lot of science behind this now. This isn't just, you know, ma and pa raising a few cows for the neighbors, right? There's real money in this.
Yeah. Very, very, very true.
So there's the intro education portion of what you're talking about, Center for Rural AI. Are you looking at going further, like I had mentioned, like through the entrepreneurial enablement, or
Yep. Yeah. Very, very much so. Literally across the street from me is a historic bed and breakfast called the Gable House. And I've been working with the owner mostly, and just because we're friends, um, to create an AI based workflow to help him attack segments of the market that he hasn't before. Corporate events, it's an awesome place for retreats, weddings. They've had a couple weddings that were mostly by accident, friends, family, and they were
Mhm.
beautiful. So we're in the process of creating a workflow where AI will actually go out, and his audience is Denver, Phoenix, Santa Fe, Albuquerque. That's where probably 70% of his audience, his guests come from. We're creating a workflow to identify, create emails, send those emails out to those corporate event planners, those wedding planners, and then build that on a monthly basis, update it with new events that they're hosting, and so on. Um, we're also working on a recommendation engine. So this AI engine is beginning to consume every possible thing that you could do in the Durango and the surrounding areas, from rafting to skiing to camping to hiking to biking to zip lining, whatever it is. And then if you become a guest there, you actually sign a questionnaire. You fill out a simple questionnaire, and then it builds your itinerary for you. It will book the ones that it can book once with your permission, and so it creates it creates an itinerary for you. It's very simple, right? Um, but it's something that for rural bed and breakfasts, there aren't too many options like this available. So that's a part of what we do. We're going to make it open source, publicly available. So could be another bed and breakfast down the street, or you could be somewhere in Montana or Idaho or whatever, and you'll be able to use this system. We're going to create a library of use cases and tools for rural America to enable themselves to participate fully in the AI economy.
Okay. So this is a problem that I've seen the okay, part 1, awesome, right? Basically, we're using tools to create environments because let's be honest. You hire a web developer, a small bed and breakfast, even though it seems like a simple thing, you could easily spend 20, 30 grand to really build out what you just described. Easily.
Yeah,
And if you
easily.
add companies like mine, where you start getting into the sophistication of what the database is doing and exportation and all this stuff, now you're at a $75,000 project, which is not reachable for a small bed and breakfast.
No,
And so we use these tools to create or to give these smaller companies a leg up, which I think is awesome. But there is a problem. And I'm kind of curious. So number 1 is signal to noise ratio, right? One of the things that has happened over the last year, and when you start saying emailing, is AI email sends are off the charts, right? And it is in it's so easy to spot them. It's an instant spam and block right out of Gmail from me. Are you going to enforce, encourage, massage a level of quality that allows the user or the client to understand this is a tool? It's not the
no,
right. This is
no.
to it's like when you get an executive assistant, right? You still got to proofread whatever she sends in your name,
Right. And
right? You
this
still
will be
got to
the
make
same.
your voice.
So, that's a part of the tweaking and the customization that you need to do when you're creating these process workflows and agents. And some of the models are better than others at that. Um, but a part of the value for the Gable House is just identifying who these people are, and populating HubSpot or whatever it is that you're using, and then send the email, follow up with a phone call. We're not talking about 1,000 entities here, right? We're talking about 100. So, create a call list, make it personal. Send them a small gift, get them to, so AI is not going to be the answer for everything by any means.
Well, and especially in this situation, I like what you said, is that it's doing some of the research that would be more time consuming than is cost effective, number 1.
Mhm.
And 2, once you have the data, doing the direct reach out, right? Um, I think that the companies that are willing to do that are going to be the companies that survive this apocalypse,
Mhm.
right? Because the companies that, it's often said, you embrace the technology or you die. Okay. They said that when the internet became consumer in the 90s.
Mhm.
They said it with websites in the early 2000s. They said it with the cloud in '08,
Mhm.
right? But all of these were infrastructure. right? They were improvements to infrastructure. They weren't improvements to process, right? You're not really gaining, like if you take the cloud, for example, you don't actually gain anything in the cloud versus on-prem. You're just shifting your work, right? This, when we're talking about AI, we're talking about something that deeply affects the workflow, the deliverable product, quality of product, the intention of the product.
Hmm.
And so, and I'm going to say something that's a little off color here, but if you don't want to be the Chinese solution to your product, you're going to, the cheap Chinese toy kind of thing, you're going to have to go farther. You're going to have to recognize it's a tool to lift up the experience.
Hmm. Yeah, very much so. Not only can you do something more efficiently, but you can actually build a better product. You can create something new much more efficiently than humans have ever been able to in the past. Again, I'm not saying it's a panacea, particularly when it comes to businesses that are um, based on human interactions, whether it's a bed and breakfast or a restaurant or whatever the case may be. Uh, but it can significantly enhance your life as a leader, a manager, a small business owner, and that's what we want to do. And we want to provide the tools to allow people to do that. And one of the other pieces that's really important here, excuse me, one of the projects that we're working on is in one of my very first Claude Code projects. I'm not a programmer by nature, but Claude Code has allowed me to do some really, really cool things. Is you look at a number of tier one universities have made their entire AI training catalog available to the public. Has have some other, and so does Anthropic and OpenAI, and they make it a chunk of their training available, and as do others. The challenge is when you look at them, particularly like the Stanford catalog and others, they're hard to consume. And they're particularly hard to consume if you are just starting your AI journey. And they have almost no rural context to them. So one of the things that we've just started doing is kind of consuming or hoovering up all the publicly available training that exists, and then creating different role-based training programs. So for higher ed, if you're in the admissions office, the operations, IT, faculty, student, segmenting the training that way for higher ed, segmenting it based on experience, AI 101 through 401. And then we've built a small context engine, which builds examples from that are meaningful to in the rural context and applying that to the training. And so this is something that we're going to begin to make available. We're realistically probably 120, 180 days away from producing this. Um, but we would never be able to do this if it weren't for AI. And so we want to provide essentially AI training for rural America.
So, and I don't want to take away from that. I think that that is a grand and important vision. Like I said, I actually believe it would open up more new markets, not just for the rural folks, but people who want to, you know, have intention toward rural folks.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, being in Montana, one of the big things is you get, city folks coming down to be cowboys for a weekend, right? That kind of thing. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's an
No.
experience, just like, anything else, just like someone might go to New York or whatever. Um, but, there is a question, brought up Anthropic. And this is something that's been weighing on me, and it's the ethics of it, right? Because Anthropic has already been busted, right? They had a class action suit, $1.5 billion they've settled because they built their public benefit corporation by stealing from the public, right? I mean that's what they did. So
Anthropic or Perplexity? Perplexity's been
Anthropic owns Claude, right?
yes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Anthropic.
Yeah.
Anthropic PBC out of California. I know this because I'm one of the people they stole from.
Mhm.
So I got the notice that says, go file your claim and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I am not a Luddite. I certainly recognize that there are times throughout history that the common person gets abused for forward movement. right? It happens, right? And I'm not excusing it, but it's reality, right? I mean,
Mhm,
if we want to, let's talk about the internet that was before your and my time, which was the railroads.
mhm,
What kind of damage did the railroads do in order to give us what we have now of a railroad network, right? But it seems like there's got to be a better way um, to do this. I mean,
mhm.
than to be taking other people's intellectual property because I can tell you if it was well, and I mean, we already know about like the New York Times lawsuits and stuff, but if it was me and I took Anthropic stuff, I'd have 15 lawyers and all of their VC up my rear for
Oh,
stealing their
that's
stuff.
happening. 4.6 model 4.6 was already scraped by some entity in Europe to train their a new model of theirs. I forget who that was. This is all happened in the last few weeks. So of course they're making a big stink about that. Basically reverse engineering it.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, I remember seeing that headline.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So uh, I think reality is and it's not just technology, it's other aspects of life. Money is going to take precedent. Commerce
sure.
and money, we just need to assume that, right? Here, it's being exacerbated by the fundamental societal changes that AI is going to wreak. Uh, some some good, like healthcare. Healthcare is going to progress faster than any time in history. I fully believe that. I was at an AI healthcare conference about 14 months ago. So 5 generations of AI ago, and it was amazing what they were talking about then. So AI has an incredible power to do good, and I think it will in healthcare. Um, but it's going faster than policy and ethics can keep up, and that's
Well, I mean, that's
because
often the case, though,
well, this
right?
is
In any new
exacerbated. I think,
technology.
yeah, I think this is just more faster than we've seen before.
I think where the challenge for me is that it's not policy that we need because it already exists. The laws already exist, right? It's not this. So the hard part here is AI is not new, right? It's been around for 70 years. It's just all of a sudden the machines are fast enough, right? And
Mhm.
we can traverse the trees, or they're not trees, but the LLMs
Yeah,
in a way that is efficient enough to make it usable and consumable by the average person. Because the average person will not wait, right? We've gotten to a point now where people are like, "I want a Netflix and chill." Boom, there it is. Right? There's no more
right,
going down to Blockbuster Video, spending 30 minutes trying to find something, bringing home a VHS tape just to have your wife say, "I'm not in the mood for that movie."
right.
Right? It's just a mouse click now. Um, but you said that, but the policies, I mean, the laws are there,
Mhm.
right? And there's an argument that maybe the laws are unfair. I mean, the idea that copyright can exist for 75 years is a little ridiculous, but it's still the law.
So there's that aspects of it, but who's liable? So liability is an issue. Uh, I was um, heartened to see last week there's a major conference in New Delhi in which I haven't read through the details yet, but 88 countries signed an ethical AI pledge, and these are some major countries. Um, and so I was heartened to see that there is real work going on in that space, whether it's EU or United Nations or other organizations. We do need to focus on ethical AI. All right, we do need to focus on equity AI. The founder of
Equity
NVIDIA came.
being equitable access for all, is that what
Yep.
okay.
The founder of NVIDIA, one of the co-founders, Malakowski, I think is his last name. I forget his first name. Came out in the paper recently on equitable AI for, and so that's what I'm trying to do is
Right.
equitable aid at one level here. Um, but we need to figure out how we need to figure out what it actually means for AI to be ethical and how that can be applied in a space where the technology is going so fast and the opportunity for to drive revenue from that is incredible. No,
So,
none of the companies are making money, which is interesting yet.
well, I mean, that's actually been something if you see I get irritated with AI not because of technology. I mean, I use it. I use Gemini all the time. I love Gemini. It is a great way to kill time, as well as to research things. So it's not that I'm anti AI, right? It's the things like there's literally no path forward for open AI to break even. Though too much money has been spent, too much money is going in. So there's
Mm,
going to be a point where either A, the investors accept the write-off, or B, they get acquired and rolled into an existing entity, right? The reason that Google can do it is because it's subsidized by all of Google's other profitable ventures,
mm,
right? Um, so it and look, I get it. I mean, anybody that looks at it, it's a bubble, and it's not the first bubble. It won't be the last bubble, and it'll all come imploding down, and all of our pundits will tell us, "See, I warned you. See, I warned you." And then from the ashes will rise a semi-reasonable economic model for using these tools and getting profitability that isn't seven trees down. I mean, I guess this is the way I'd put it. If you're using AI as your business right now,
mhm.
right? If you're an AI creator, an AI influencer, I built this tool to help you manipulate AI. You're just MLM. You're a multi-level marketing scheme,
Mm,
right? You're not a business. You're not actually in it for producing something of value, which is why I reached out to you because the education factor and the equitable factor, um, outside of concerns, for example, lack of cognitive or less cognitive function, which is something we've run into recently within young people because of the way technology is taking over your ability to think. And no, that's not a press release, folks. They've done the studies. It's
mhm.
real.
Yep.
Um, but imagine, we're talking about rural, okay? Well, rural, one of the things that is reasonably identified with rural is less economic power,
Mhm.
right? Because for some reason, people do not value beets and potatoes like they do Nike, okay? They just don't. It's just the way it is, or Apple, okay? Apple,
Mhm.
phones. But imagine the equitable effect for, since we're talking about poverty, of inner city.
Mm.
Right? What kind of when all of a sudden you don't need uh you don't need access to the best schools because you're not going to get it because you're inner city. You don't need access to the best teachers even if I don't care how dedicated they are. There's also the resource problem, right? They could be the best teacher in the world, but they just don't have the resources to be that best teacher. All of a sudden they have this tool that gives infinite access, and they don't need a card catalog, and they don't need the Dewey Decimal System, and they don't have to go through 17 books of cited references to find the one chapter in this one book that was written 100 years ago, right? They don't have to spend all day in the library trying to figure this stuff out. That's equitable access to me. And from a rural perspective, there's been a migration to rural from city people. Um,
But is that lasting? That there's a COVID response.
mhm.
Uh, is that going to be a lasting demographic change? I'm not sure.
I don't think it will be in the way that people think about what rural is.
Mhm.
But let me explain. So I am a member of the schoolie. Do you know what schoolies are?
The what?
Schoolies? Okay, you know what van life is.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, what a schoolie is a school bus that's been converted into an RV.
Oh sure.
Okay.
I've seen a
I
few of them.
literally know a lot. I mean, I can't even count them. I definitely can't count them on two, three, four, five hands. Okay. Families that what they did is they gave up on quote unquote the American dream. They traveled the country, they bought a schoolie, sold everything, traveled the country with their family, settled somewhere. Most of them, Tennessee, Arkansas, that area, just because land's so cheap,
Mhm.
and have started homesteading, and they have jobs, but they're rural. And they do it because I mean, some of them are for conservative Christians, some of them are very granola progressives, some of them are anti-capitalist, um, and I think yeah. My point is, I think yes, it will stick, and the reason is that I am as city as they come, and I moved off grid because I no longer wanted to be beaten down by that infrastructure. Sound pollution, noise pollution, light pollution, the pervasiveness of increased cancer rates when you live near traffic. All of this is scientific, right? It's not anti-vax BS, right? This is the real stuff. And so, yeah, I think plus look at it from an economic perspective. Most companies don't pay people well, but people want property. What does that mean? You got to go where property's cheap. Where's property cheap? Rural, right? Even if it's only an acre.
So a large portion of that migration that occurred also were well-paid workers who
That's
drove
true.
up property values in rural places like Durango. As a Durango
Right.
homeowner, it was awesome. Since the year before COVID, my property's gone up about 50% or more, 60%.
Yeah, but
Um,
what have your property taxes done?
they just took a huge pop.
Yeah.
But the point being, some of that, and part of it was a wanting to get for the very accurate reasons you cited, wanted to get away from urban urban situations. Um, but I'm again those folks, which are a huge chunk of that migration that occurred. I'm not sure that they're going to stay. Um, we'll see.
Well, there's always,
But
you
the
know,
price of if you look at the
buyer's
price,
regret, right? Or
yes,
the romanticism.
yes,
I mean, as you know, I am uh off grid, like I mentioned, and currently I'm like really off grid. Like I have to go fetch my water from the well. Right. And
mhm,
that's getting real tight. I mean, on the summer project list is no, 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 no. I'm not going to be doing that. The well's going to run off the batteries. That's going to run to a pump. I'm going to have a faucet, you know? So there's certain luxuries that I do miss, certainly. But even with the amount that you mentioned, right? A lot of people mention the RTO, return to office, which obviously would affect that. Um, but that hasn't been as extreme. Like if you look at the actual numbers, it's there, absolutely, but it's not as extreme as a lot of people think, right? It's not like 90% of your work from home had to move back to the office. It's not that.
mhm,
And then you're going to get your natural people that migrate away, right? They're just like, okay, this just isn't for me. I want restaurants on demand, right? That type of thing. But, you
mhm.
know, I bet you see, let's call it 30% of the people like laying money on this, right? We're making the 30% of the people that did it stay. That's a net increase.
Right. And how do we bring this back to AI? How is that specifically related to rural
Well, I
AI?
think the AI, that's actually a great question. Thank you for being a good host. Um, the reason it comes back to AI is that AI is going to enable those folks that stay in the rural environment
Mhm,
to have a greater access to resources, whether they are well off, like yourself and myself, or
mhm,
whether or not they're of a lesser economic class that we're trying to survive,
mhm,
right? All of a sudden, it's kind of like, well, a simple example. Back
mhm,
when Etsy was cool, right? Etsy enabled a lot of crafters who normally have to go to all these craft shows, so
mhm.
they barely, if at all, break even, right? All of a sudden, they had this new market available to them. eBay did a similar thing before Etsy,
Right.
right? Well, AI is going to produce that same result, but it's going to do it like you're mentioning, which is lifting equitable access to professional results, which that they could not otherwise afford.
Well, we'll see about the affordability question. So they have to figure out the frontier models. Any of the AI builders have to figure out how to make money at some point in time.
Right.
In some way, shape, or form. We know there's going to be a consolidation. There has been in every single technology evolution that's existed. So there will be a consolidation. Um, but what the new business models will look like, I think, is a huge question, and how equitable they will be for or accessible to rural citizens or small businesses. Like these conversations I was having last week, they're using the free versions because they couldn't afford $20 a week for the paid versions.
Right.
Uh, so if we all of a sudden see those entry level subscriptions jump by a decimal point in order of magnitude, then how do we figure out how to provide equitable access? Then is there an AI co-op? Right? Do we
Well,
need
that's what I was
full?
going to ask you right there. I mean, you're obviously focused primarily in Colorado right now.
Yeah, right now.
Colorado is not the only rural state. Like, I mean, unless you're on the coast, you're
And
rural.
it's less rural than a lot of them out there. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so, and even, I mean, Texas, sure, it's got 4 large, huge, massively dense hubs, and the rest of it is rural,
Yep.
right? And that your co-op idea, I mean, so ranchers are doing this now. Ranchers are starting to take deep advantage of the internet,
Mhm.
essentially, which is to auction their heifers, their cows. And it's one of the reasons all of a sudden they're starting to make money that they haven't seen in decades off of
Mhm.
one head of cattle, one head of cow, um, and one head of cow. Um, but I could see something similar, right? Where basically, if you're co-opting this, not co-opting, but using a cooperative environment,
Yeah.
your data is going to get more dense. It's not going to be just applicable to because rural is different depending on the type of rural we're talking about. Eastern Montana rural has entirely different needs than Western Montana,
Mm.
right? Because like in Eastern Montana, there's no trees,
Mm.
right? It's plains. So having that capability, where all of a sudden Colorado, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Minnesota, Wisconsin, we're all working together to produce this data into a cooperative. I mean, at this point, it would be an LLM. I think that technology isn't going to last, but
Mhm.
at this point, it would be an LLM.
Yeah, or a co-op that not only does that, now we're talking about sovereign data, and I'm a big fan of how do we provide either a service, maybe a subscription, or a stack of hardware software components for organizations to actually have control over their own data. The ability to source and kind of rationalize their own data and then decide how and when and where it's shared. So living amongst 4 native tribes here, literally one of the reservations about a mile away, um, that's a big issue. It's so I've
Elaborate
been
on that.
looking.
This is interesting to me.
Yeah, so I've been looking, and there is, well, the last time I looked was 3 weeks ago. So now there could be 5 people doing it. I don't know. But there was no stack of components that created in kind of an AI data stack, the ability to again source, consume, and rationalize your own data. I looked, I did some research. There are about 14 different open source components that are open source projects that are available today. That if you bundle them all together, you can create your own sovereign data AI capabilities. But I assumed there'd be a proprietary. There'd be something proprietary. There isn't. I couldn't find it. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I couldn't find it.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a really interesting company out there when you get a chance, Kamawazi. Take a look at it. They're providing elements of this. They do work with Department of Defense, but they also work with municipalities and others to provide a piece of what I would call a sovereign data stack. But I think this is going to be, I'm waiting for somebody to build this. Now, I looked at these, you know this. Um, creating the glue to put 14 different open source projects together is not trivial. And
No,
then
it's
to maintain it, to keep it up to date, just versioning is gonna be a huge issue. But the point is, the technology exists, and these are proven projects. These aren't edge projects. These are proven projects that could be glued together to provide that capability.
so, but you said, I want to lean into this a little bit. The native or indigenous populations. You said 4 or 5 different
Right around there.
reservations around you.
Yeah.
How is it that I mean, it seems like it's obvious, but I'm not sure that it is. What is the challenge for those citizens to be able to have the sovereign data and be able to deploy AI?
So accessibility. There's one tribe that's near us, Southern Utes, that have a lot that own a lot of the oil and gas rights to the entire southwestern United States. So
Good for them.
they're doing fairly well. All right. But then around them are a number of other tribes that really don't have the access to the resources that the Southern Utes do. Um, and so they don't have broadband on the reservation. What I have found in talking to them, and I did a weekend sprint, a Techstars weekend sprint about 3 months ago, and I joined um, a lady of the Navajo tribe, well, that wanted to build out AI fundamental training for tribal members. And we're spending this week together. We're building out the business model. We're putting together a website, doing all the kind of basic stuff you do to sprint, right? And I thought I'm fairly progressive. I thought I understood the challenges that Native Americans experienced. I've certainly seen, the misrepresentations.
Sure.
And we were just trying to build out our presentation for the final day when we pitched the people from Techstars. Um, and she was really funny. She said, "Okay, I want you guys to source the images for our presentation. You guys, the other members of her team were 3 white guys, like within 10-15 years of my age, right? We all felt we were um, fairly open-minded individuals, right? And so we built this presentation, and then we put images on it that we had done some research on and thought were representative, and we gave her the presentation back, and we said, "Okay, let's prep, let's get ready to go." And she said, "That image is wrong because of this. That image is wrong because of this. That image is wrong because of this," right? And then we ended up using as our slide, our main slide, it was a poll from Obama's during the uh, for the second where Obama's elected to a second term. It was a poll put out by CNN that listed voters by demographic, and it had white, black, Hispanic, Asian, other, Native Americans. She said, "Yes, my whole life I've been other." So this was a CNN poll, right? That said that Native Americans are other.
Right.
Uh, and this wasn't that long ago. And the whole point of that being is that, and there was a game, there was some sort of first person player game. I don't remember what it was. It came out a few years ago that had really misrepresented a certain Native American tribe. They sued the game company and won for misrepresentation. So to me, you build this sovereign AI, you enable the tribes to source and ingest and consume and rationalize their own data. Then they can decide who and when they share it, who they share it with. Maybe they license it. If a game company wants to use the tribe for one of their new online video games, they would license the content from the tribe, and they would be represented accurately. That's the type of thing that I think of when I think of sovereign data.
So, and this is just as a random fact. Like you said, you went through an experience by working with a native tribe, and you were dealing with a Navajo woman. And what a lot of people don't understand. We have our history books and all of that, and we're told this and that, and everyone has an opinion. They have their opinion. We have our opinion. Whatever. But what a lot of people don't get is, let's take the Navajo Nation, okay, which I have driven through many, many times.
Mm,
It's about the size of New Jersey,
mm,
right? So it's not just right 640 acres somewhere in the mountains, right? We're talking about a state size sovereign nation that doesn't have running water for the majority of their people.
mhm,
Okay, there's a whole Navajo Water Foundation project that I was made aware of a while back. So when we think about that, and especially you and I being, where natives are, right? I think the sovereign data, having the ability to have a source of truth from them,
mhm,
with equitable access to sources of truth that are outside of them as well, right? Because
mhm.
it's, it might help lift them up beyond casinos.
Well, and there's also a bit of a dichotomy, right? That's going on. Is this woman was sharing with me? Um, she said what you find in some tribes, not all tribes. Right? She said some tribes still plant according to the moon, the season. They have ceremonies, they have rituals when they're going to plant, and it's not always the most optimal time, depending upon the water table, or what's
Right.
is there some sort of natural event that makes planting by the moon not the right thing to do. Says so that's one challenge. But then when you look at their farm, they have the most modern John Deere tractor that's connected to a satellite, and that plants and harvests incredibly efficiently. So you have this dichotomy of the adoption of modern technology where they can, yet still adhering to very old tribal traditions. And what she wanted to do was try and find a way to bridge that, to work with the tribes to bridge that dichotomy that exists, and using AI to do so.
You're pushing against tradition there, though, right? I
Very
mean,
much so.
and a lot of people might be like, I mean, that's dumb. Come on, we know better. We have plenty of our own damn traditions that are dumb, and we know better.
Absolutely.
you
Mhm.
know. Um, all right. Well, hey, I think we're on the same page as a general rule. I mean, we want AI to be equitable. We want it to be ethical, and obviously helping people who wouldn't otherwise, who basically be run over by it, right? They would be run over by it if
Yes.
there isn't someone out there waving a flag saying, "Hey, I have some of the answers. I'm here to help." Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I appreciate that characterization. We are going to try and provide some of the answers. We don't pretend to be able to provide all of the answers or even know what they are. Um, but right now, um, we're off the ground. We're running. We're working. We're collaborating with our local university, Fort Lewis College, that is one of that created the AI Institute 2 years ago. One of the very first to do anything in AI in rural higher education. So we're collaborating with them. Um, but right now, I am interested in. I am happy to talk to people. I am happy to connect. We are fundraising. Um, and so the more conversations I can have with folks like yourself and others is awesome.
All right, folks, this has been another More Than a Refresh with Andrew Aitken of the Center for Rural AI. Thank you so much for joining us, Andrew.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the conversation.